Imagine you've just created something, a work of art, an essay, a budget, and you're ready to share it with someone, an audience, a colleague, a family member. Your heart is beating as you anxiously await their response. Now, I've been there, as I'm sure many of you have too, and that moment is the moment for feedback. Tonight, I'd like to share with you what I have learned about the feedback loop. My nonlinear career path has informed my research and my thinking about the feedback loop. After graduating in communication and marketing, I landed a job in high tech in the late 90s. After a decade of work, which seemed more like a lifetime, I opted out to raise our beautiful 3 children. When our youngest was in 3rd grade, I pivoted and went to grad school. And now I teach future leaders at the Huntsman School of Business here at Utah State University. In art school, I wanted a challenge, and that is what I decided to do when I took on my graduate work. When I signed up, I had no prior experience, so they gave me a studio, some coursework, and a date for my first art critique. I was absolutely petrified, but I did what I knew best, and I went to work in my studio, spending hours creating and crafting something that I hoped would convey my concepts and resonate with my audience. When I showed up, I brought along smelling boxes. I was working with the idea that I would use a word and a visual and a scent. Here's a close-up of one of those boxes. You see the word purple, colored yellow, and if you got really close, you would smell lemon. But I quickly learned that my critics did not see or smell my boxes with the same intent that I had. Unfortunately, I was not prepared for feedback. I had spent all that time in my studio thinking about my perspective, but I had not prepared myself for the intense and honest critique experience. Now, I barely heard a word, and I hardly participated when my other fellow grads showed their work. Afterwards, I realized I needed to get better at receiving and giving feedback. This started me on a personal quest, which led to a professional journey that has helped me to understand the feedback loop through the critique process. The goal is to create healthy conflict. One half of the loop is the art of asking for feedback, and I have 3 working principles I'd like to share with you. The first is be brave. Now, at the Huntsman School, we call it Dare Mighty, but it's the idea that sometimes we need to put on our imaginary red cape and leap into the unknown. Now, I'm not talking about being brave in frictionless spaces like your social media feeds. Instead, think about spaces that are friction-full, like classrooms, town halls, or where you or your ideas are the minority. And I'm asking you to be brave in those spaces. Second, bring a growth mindset. Carol Dweck researches fixed and growth thinking. A fixed mindset takes feedback and beats themselves up when they don't do well, and then they stop. A growth mindset takes feedback, asks what they can do to improve, and then goes to work. During my first art critique, I was squarely in that fixed mindset. I wrongly believed that I would either wow my audience or I would fail. And that binary outlook allowed little room for my personal growth. Luckily, we can improve and rethink our process. That third principle when asking for feedback is the quest to reflect. How often do we give ourselves the space and time that we need to consider about what we've created? Peter Drucker, known as the father of business, once said, "Follow effective action with quiet reflection." During my grad school, I decided to create a feedback notebook. And during my critiques, I would hand it to a fellow grad and ask them to write down every single word that they heard. I then afterwards would jot down more ideas. This practice helped me ask for feedback that I wrote, not reacted to. Often, I would only find about 10% of the feedback worthy of consideration, but it was the heat I needed to move forward. Now, asking for feedback is one half of the loop. There is the other half of giving feedback, and I'm learning through research that we need both halves to create healthy conflict. When giving feedback, consider these 3 guiding principles. The first is be kind. Now, I'm not talking about the Emily Post be nice attitude when she told her readers to avoid all things unpleasant, or the advice that is embedded in our culture from the Freemason code that forbade doing or saying anything offensive. They erroneously taught that airing differences did no good. But in fact, that is not kindness, but yawn-inducing, time-wasting commentary. And commentary uses words like interesting, and that has really no substance. And feedback needs heat. However, in critique, we don't focus on the person, we focus on the work. Feedback research shows us that we want candid feedback, but attitudes shift as we use the word you in that, as in, you didn't use the right color. Defenses go up, and we stop listening. Now, conflict training teaches us to use I language and to focus on how the work is being interpreted. For instance, that color conveys sadness to me. If you want to watch a fantastic critique, take a cue from my most recent pandemic Netflix binge, The Great British Baking Show. Now, Paul and Prue are both kind and focus on the product, not the person. You might hear them say something like, "The sponge hasn't risen properly," or "I can't taste any cardamom in that biscuit." Is there heat in the critique? Absolutely. Do the bakers sometimes shed tears? Yes. Are handshakes given? Rarely. But the bakers are learning and growing and improving. This leads me to the final part of giving feedback, and that is the opportunity to give support. When I finished my first critique, I was devastated. Luckily, my professors and fellow grads reached out and provided critical scaffolding to build my confidence and help me prepare for the next round. This is the benefit of a cohort. But support can be given in small doses. When Prue tells the baker, "Try taking the sponge out of the oven a little earlier next time." Or when a colleague shares with you, "I just listened to a podcast with the same idea. Let me share it with you." If the critic, whether in the classroom, the boardroom, or the bedroom, offers no support, then that feedback is null. Because feedback is a give and take process. The feedback loop brought me, time and again, back to my studio. I continued to work with multiple senses and textures, creating objects that could twist and turn, placing balloons among gold leaf, and seeing a few of my pieces move across the US to the MoMA in New York and the Manna Contemporary in Chicago. In fact, you can see one of my pieces here at the Logan USU campus on the 4th floor of the Sorensen building. It's called Hello. The art of asking for and giving feedback requires being brave and being kind, being ready to grow and focusing on the work, not the person, reflecting and supporting. This cycle promotes healthy conflict. And as an educator, I see myself giving feedback more often than asking. But guess what? I still need both sides of the loop to challenge and refine and improve myself. This TED experience has given me a chance to ask for a lot of feedback, and I'm the better for it. Healthy conflict creates heat, and heat helps us rise to better ourselves and to better our communities. So let's turn up the heat, embrace healthy conflict, and be open to asking and giving feedback. Thank you.